This is a figure drawing tutorial that will focus on the basic human proportions and 3 basic poses. If you love learning about art, hit that subscribe button and support this public school teacher's side hustle. Find me on Instagram and TikTok to see what my students are up to in my classroom. We will be using the basic shapes and proportions of a traditional drawing mannequin. However, I will be using the website setpose.com to manipulate my poses. I love this website because it's free, which is perfect for a classroom teacher. And also you can really play around with different poses without having the limitations of a wooden mannequin. This is an excellent resource for new artists, beginners, and it's really great for a classroom as well. I am using a ruler to start, and we're going to start with just the basic figure drawing proportions. The typical human body, and typical and human body almost are oxymorons as it is, but we're going to use a 1-inch scale, and we're going to pretend that this body is broken up into 8 even sections. As we know, humans are very atypical. There's so many exceptions, and we're going to be focusing on proportion, which is size relationships. And all those relationships will go back to the head. So the size of the head is going to be our unit of measurement. We're doing this very small in a sketchbook, a 1-inch scale. So in box number 1, you're going to draw an oval, and this will represent the human head. Probably a good idea to go ahead and number your sections so you don't have to go back and do it later. Your neck is then going to go down into box number 2. You'll watch me go back and number this in just a second because I realize can't really call out the numbers if it's not labeled. And a typical person would have about the size of a head on both shoulders, so that would be the width of the torso. Here I go, labeling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now I'm going to go down in my torso, so shoulders down to my waist is going to be box 2 and 3, with the exception of how the neck goes down just a little bit. So you see the gap between 1 and 2. Next up is the pelvis, which is a very important body part because it connects the torso to the lower half. That is going to be a different shape than the head, but it's going to take up a 1-inch section. So about, again, typically the length of one human head. The legs are going to be, believe it or not, the halfway point of the body. So from the edge of the pelvis to the bottom of the foot is going to take up half of the space. Let's focus on just the thighs for now. So going down to box number 6, I'm connecting my legs here, and the knee goes all the way up to the hip and then to the center of the pelvis. Then the rest of the leg, of course, we have our calf down to our foot, and the foot does need to stay in box number 8. So remember, simplification here. The human body comes in all different shapes and sizes. We're focusing on the skeletal system with just like a layer of muscle. So body type isn't really playing a factor here. We're not really thinking about layers of fat or skin. Think of this as like a skeletal muscular drawing. Turning the foot the other direction because why not? Even though it looks kind of funny, practice makes better, right? Now that we have the legs, the pelvis, the torso, and the head, let's go back and map out where the arms are. So students have a hard time believing that from the bottom of section 4, so the bottom of the pelvis to the foot is half of the body. I also see a lot of really short arms. So your hands, if they were laying flat next to you, the elbow would hit at the 3rd section and go all the way to 4.5. So if you stand up and put your hands next to your legs, you will see that they fall kind of mid-thigh. Again, we all know people with extra long arms or maybe even shorter arms. Remember, we're using a very simplified set here, a very simplified system to kind of create a drawing in its most simple form. Okay, pose number 2 is going to be very similar with very slight variations. All 3 of these poses are going to be front facing. There's going to be a lot of difficulty when you learn to draw the figure that's turning or in motion or reaching with foreshortening. So we're going to keep things very basic here as if this is the first time you've ever really drawn a figure. And you can see I'm going back and measuring, making my figures the exact same height, which of course in real life wouldn't happen. I'm doing the same 1-inch sections, 8 total, starting with the head. So with this pose, I'm going to have one leg stuck out and then my hands on my hips. Starting with the same oval here, you can also turn the head, and if you face the oval a slightly different direction, it gives the illusion of the head turning. So that's a fun thing to play with as well. Remember, the head's not a circle, it's an oval. Connecting my neck here, going down, remember, into section number 2, so there will be a little bit of a space. And although my head's turned to look at the first figure, I'm going to keep things simple and do a front-facing torso. Things get very complicated when the torso is twisting, so let's simplify and keep this very basic. doing that same kind of soft triangular shape because your waist goes in and your shoulders go out. Remember, there is typically about a human head on each side, but we all know people with slender frames or wider frames. And you see I added some lines here, so if you wanted to think more about body type, you could do that. Pelvis, again, kind of a soft triangular shape, goes down to section number 4, so that's half of the body here. Let's go ahead and do the knee up to the hip. So we'll keep this leg the same. This is front facing, straight up and down, just like we drew before. You can see I'm drawing kind of a potato shape for my foot, not trying to do a side foot here. And the knee is the halfway point of the foot. Okay, so on the other side, here's where it gets complicated. It would be the same length, okay? It's just not gonna be straight up and down. So you can see I took my fingers to measure. The knee would still be in the same place. And then the leg is going out at a diagonal instead of straight up and down. Again, it's still the same length just because you're front facing. You're just kind of like sticking your leg out to the side. It's not front and back. It's still that front facing plane. The knee is the halfway point. I'm kicking my other drawing here, so I'm just doing a little bit of erasing. And as you can see, it would not go all the way down to the bottom line. It's the same length, but because of the diagonal, it would not hit that bottom line. A trick here is to hold out a ruler and see where the foot would touch the other leg because proportion is all about size relationships. So see how it goes above the foot but hits kind of mid calf? That's a good way to check yourself to see how the body parts interact with each other. Now that I have my bottom half figured out, my arms I'm going to put on the hips, and exactly like with the foot, instead of a straight up and down, you're changing it to a diagonal. So the shoulder to the elbow is the same length, it's just out at an angle, and then the elbow to the hand, same thing. So you can see the hands stop at the pelvis because they're not laid down straight. So you're having to break each section into its own measurement instead of relying on it hitting at that 4.5 mark. I'm gonna go ahead and put my hands on my hips so that I know where I'm headed. And then the arm here needs to be, again, the same measurement. So about one section, a little bit less because the torso goes down a little bit less into section number 2. So about 2 sections, about 2 3/4. And then you can measure the same arm. It should be the same length on both sides. Then that's the easy part. If you get that right, then this section should be correct too. And that's about one section here. The hand extends farther down, but since the hand is on my hips, that should be one human head in length. Let's repeat the same on the other side. Keeping things simple, we're doing hands on hips, both sides. And yes, with this front facing pose, they should be the same because there's no foreshortening involved or anything like that. And that's another lesson for another day. Okay, looks about right. Now let's move on to pose number 3. So again, I'm going to make mine the same height because this is practice. This is not something that I would like put in an art show. This is a teaching strategy. So think of this as like a sketchbook page. It's evidence of learning. And I'm going ahead and doing the same measurements lined up, making them all the same height, the same shape, the same proportion, which again is not typical if you have a group of humans standing together. And remember, it's not that everyone's the same height, it's that everyone is in proportion to their own measurements. So like your head would be your unit of measurement. Speaking of the head, let's turn it the other way as if he's looking at our central figure. You can see I changed it in set pose so that it was rounded on the left side and then more pointy on the right, making that triangular shape for my torso in sections 2 and 3, leaving a gap for my neck. Again, this is another front-facing basic pose. We're going to build on some of those same principles. I'm going to leave my legs alone this time, except for the one on the right. So we're going to play around after our pelvis with something called foreshortening, and like really not even at all. It's just the tiniest bit of making the leg look like it's stepping forward and one leg is back. I'll show you what I mean once I draw this basic leg. So again, this section, the knee stops at section 6, and then I'm continuing down to the foot to fill out the end of section 8. Okay, so I wasn't able to manipulate on my phone my figure over here. His legs look like they're standing straight. So let me show you a trick. If you want that leg to look like it's going back into space, make it appear a little bit smaller and then have the foot come up higher than section 8. So you're playing with your proportions because as things are closer to you, they are larger. And as things are farther away, they get smaller. So if you want to give just the illusion of one leg in front of the other, make it slightly smaller. It's still in proportion to itself. And then have your foot raised up slightly higher. So it's still front facing, but it looks like he's taking a little bit of a step forward. And that's something that you can play around with and exaggerate as you go. And then as far as the arms here for a basic pose, let's kind of keep the left hand, the left arm nice and straight, kind of how we've been practicing. So connecting from my shoulder here, going down into section number 3. And then we have one section from elbow to the wrist, and then our hand kind of hanging down straight to mid-thigh. The other arm, let's do it outreached. And this is completely different than the hands on the hips. So you can see it's kind of straight across. So although it's not going to touch a section, it should still be the same length as the hand. And I'm trying to figure out, because I'm crossing in front of my figure here, so I'm kind of like kicking him and punching him. And I'm going to change the angle just a little bit here and make it a little bit less of a straight line, a little bit more of a diagonal, connecting to my shoulder. And then awkwardly, the placement here is not perfect. I'm going to put my hand behind him so it doesn't look like I'm smacking him in the face. And then that's always awkward. I find it best to not just not draw it, but draw everything and then erase it. It's much easier to draw it accurately and erase what you don't need than to like try and guess what's not there. Speaking of not there, let's erase that line so the head looks dominant. Poor middle guy, he's just getting attacked from all angles. And then it looks like you have an arm kind of raised forward. Kind of has a ballet look here. So these are some basic poses. You could go back and ink them. You could fill up a whole page of practice. I highly recommend when you're practicing to try and draw them even larger. And this is just a stepping stone for learning how to draw the figure. It's not like this is going to be something you do every time. At some point, you're not going to need to draw those 1-inch sections or however large your sections are, because your brain will automatically see it. And then you can graduate from just awkward looking, AI looking figures in a sketchbook to beautiful works of art and gesture drawing, where you're drawing the human figure from real life. And that's a wrap. 3 basic figure drawing poses using the figure drawing mannequin for inspiration. Thank you so much for sticking around and making art with me. And if you're interested in more tutorials, check these out. Find my website, thatartteacher.com, for full-length lesson plans, student examples, and videos, all for free.